Okay, so in general, the I think you could we could start by probably on this call, it's probably useful to start from kind of like the first layer of innovation in the blockchain space and what that created and why people were excited about it. And that's, you know, Bitcoin. Why on earth are people excited about Bitcoin? And answering that, we can then go to the next layer of like, what are we thinking about and why are people excited about it? So people are excited about Bitcoin because it enables through the sort of like network of miners that are all running these computations, it allows you to have the exact same ledger of transactions distributed around the world, which means that you don't have to have any central authority issuing money. Why is that cool? Well, because central authorities issuing money tend to also do other things like levy taxes or throw you in jail or various other coercive and violent actions, which, you know, arguably maybe maintain order or on the other side, maybe create oppression. I don't think we're here to judge that, but that's why people are excited about it, right? Is that you can exchange value without having one central authority that is like coercively controlling the whole economy, right? Which, so that's why people are excited. Okay, that's sort of like premise number one, just, you know, in terms of setting the space. Now, along comes Regen Network. Here we go. We're interested in solving probably the world's most challenging economic and ecological issues, which are things like, how can you make it so that people don't deplete their soil for short-term profit, or overfish a fishery for short-term gain, or clear-cut the forest for short-term profit? All of these are questions around aligning economic incentives with long-term health of the system. This is like an age-old problem. It's, you know, talked about in terms of the tragedy of the commons, but really it's something even deeper than that. And it's kind of like a social coordination intersecting with economic challenge. Like, how do you coordinate people who everyone will benefit if they behave differently? How do you coordinate that such that that behavior becomes what everybody's doing instead of some actors competing to extract as much value as possible? And this is why blockchain is awesome, right? This is why we're not just launching a centralized app that on its own creates scientific clarity or connects one user to another, because it's actually a social problem. It's not a problem that can just get solved simply like with a single technology. So, okay, along comes, in this sort of march of ideas, along comes the proof of stake network, which allows for a consensus amongst a wide group of people about what's reality. In this case, usually in relationship to a distributed ledger, or that is to say, everybody has access to the same history of transactions, and therefore you can achieve the same thing that you did with Bitcoin without having to burn all the energy, right? But what else can you put on that ledger? Oh, well, it turns out you don't have to only limit what you put on a distributed ledger to the transactions, like the transactions of, you know, Bitcoin or Ethereum or some other cryptocurrency. It turns out you can also embed in that ledger other forms of data. And you can also create automated scripts, or what we would call smart contracts, so that these elements of data can relate to one another and create agreements between parties that are more complex than just like, I gave Will my token, and that is accounted for. So why is that exciting? That's exciting because for the first time in the world, we could create a sort of like a global consensus around ecological health, and we can create a set of an ability for people to make agreements about that ecological health. And we can link it to the most ubiquitous social agreement in the world, which is around the financial system. Pretty much everybody uses some form of money. Pretty much everybody enters into contracts using some form of money, some form of currency. So you sort of start to see that our aim here is really to create a decentralized infrastructure that allows us to have economic and financial agreements that are based in consensus about ecological state. Okay, so that's my like sort of like framing, marching up the order. There's a lot of ideas there. I'm gonna take a pause, and now I'm gonna talk about some of the, well, maybe I'll take a pause and see if Will or Kyle have any upgrades or addendums to that.
In talking about economics here, there's two kind of big questions. One is what I would call the crypto economic side of things. And then the other is what I would, I've always kind of lately, anyway, been referring to as like the real economy, or the economy of, you know, like people and resources. The paper here is oriented largely, I mean, after we kind of get to, you know, talk about the assumptions and the origins of all of this, one of the key things that we're talking about here is on the crypto economic side, which is where we'll get to at the end. But in order for all that other stuff to happen, all the other real economic stuff to happen, we need to have the crypto part locked down and secure and functioning in a way that the people who are operating validator nodes for Regen Network are doing what they should be doing, because that all kind of like comes back to that one sort of source of truth, or whatever you want to call it. So I'll stop at that.
That's a great segue, Kyle. Thank you. So what the hell does that mean? What is a validator node, and why is it important that they, like, what is their role in the network? Why are they important for generating the ecological ledger, claim, and agreement framework that Regen Network is creating in the world? Okay, so I left off my part of the story with the emergence of proof of stake. What is proof of stake? Proof of stake is a way of generating network consensus without having to run these massively sort of energy-intensive computations in order to sort of like race computers against each other to maintain a Byzantine fault-tolerant network, which means that, you know, which I'm not going to get into what that means. If you have questions about that, we'll do it later. Proof of stake enables us to essentially create a censorship-resistant network, which means that the truth is distributed amongst the data, let's just say. The data is distributed amongst so many different computers that it would be almost impossible, or impossible, depending on how many computers there are, to actually like crash the network. Because you would have to, you know, crash computers all over the world all at the same time. And if you don't succeed that, then they just replicate and pop back up again, right? Why is it important why is this important for our use case? Censorship resistance. Why is censorship resistance something that we're spending so much time and effort to place at the center of Regen Network? Well, okay, so if you're thinking about coordinating a group of people to make large changes to how they interact with one another economically, socially, and environmentally, you need to have some sort of like common ground where everybody comes to, and everybody's basically like on has an even playing field, right? And where no single actor could manipulate and change the truth, so to speak, right? Because when you're talking about like all money in the world comes from ecosystem health. There's zero financial wealth in the world that doesn't at some point, that didn't at some point start with, you know, natural resources like oil, or natural resources that come from the ocean or forests, or just think about the oxygen and, you know, photosynthesis and all of that. Everything, the entire economy relies on ecological health. So if we were to create a platform that basically is addressing the most fundamental parts of our economy and make it easy for big players to manipulate the truth that agreements are being made upon, we would just be recapitulating all of the existing problems of the current economy, where the truth is basically not accessible by the people who need it, right? So you have oil companies saying for 20 years that climate change wasn't a thing, while they knew that it was. You have, you know, big pharmaceuticals and big agriculture saying things they know are untrue so that they can maintain market share. So fundamentally, at the base layer, in order for the global economy to realign with ecological health, we have to have censorship-resistant, flat playing field where everyone can access, when they need it, information about ecological state. That's like premise number one. And the most cost-effective and proven approach to creating something like that is a proof-of-stake network, like what we've proposed to the world and what Aaron and the rest of the team have been working really hard to create with Regen Ledger. So underpinning that network is a set of crypto economic, what is called in the space primitives, or that is to say, financial arrangements that create incentives for people to run, basically for people to have small businesses to maintain the state and distribution of the network around the world, so that at any moment, any human can access that important ecological data and could make agreements with other people about it, right? That's the basic utility that Regen Ledger is launching with, is the ability for everyone to have access to a ledger that is custom built for ecological data, right? And for that ledger to be strong enough from day one that it can't really be attacked and knocked down by anyone. Because that's what's going to generate trust for people to come and put their, you know, scientific considerations and their sort of community management information and all of these other things onto the ledger, because they know it will be there tomorrow and the next day and the next day, even if someone wants it to not be there. So that's sort of like the fundamental economic underpinning in this paper, is describing the token economics of our proof of stake network and how it relates to the value that we're generating for the world, which is this ledger and contracting framework about ecological state. That's like the base layer utility that we're telling our users they will always have access to. And this paper basically lines out the economics of how we will achieve that. And in general, we're cloning a lot of the work, hard work and good thinking of the Cosmos hub in order to, which is sort of like battle tested to a certain degree, and putting that into our system as the base layer of a proof of stake system. So then this paper further goes in to talk about the way that the use of this network will accrue value to the people who are running businesses to maintain the computer nodes that are, you know, the validator nodes, which is what they're called technically, that are running all around the world to make sure that there is always uptime and that the network is, again, creating the public good of this ledger of ecological health. So, you know, we talk about the, you know, types of transactions that will be made, the types of collateralized exchange, the types of agreements, the data that's going to be flowing through, and how that all adds up to the economic case for validators around the world to maintain this distributed network, which is, you know, although it's not highly energy intensive, it takes a lot of human work, because running a validator node is a highly specialized, highly skilled at this moment, and that may change, skilled. So it takes a lot of effort, to make that work. And so those people are the first people who sort of like have a clear economic incentive baked into the token economics. Now, I'd like to add that, before I sort of pause, that what we've created can be considered sort of the substrate or base layer for many other types of economic arrangements and token designs. So once everybody can trust that there's like this 100% uptime, censorship resistant, spread around the world ledger of ecological health that people can then write true and create agreements about, those agreements can also be tokenized. So that means you can create all these other financial instruments upon this solid base layer so that people could create tokens that are related to the health of the rainforest, or tokens that are representing agreements about watershed health on a local scale, or water rights, the rights to access water, or all of these other things. So this next layer functionality can be tokenized, and it doesn't have to be. They can also simply be automated agreements between parties that operate, or they can also simply just be relying on the transparent public ledger, like we're doing with Rainforest Alliance, to create this sort of auditable trail. So there's this whole sort of like nested layer of value that is only possible with the proof of stake, global censorship resistant ledger of ecological health, which this economics paper is explaining how our token design helps create. So I would encourage everybody to just take a moment and ask yourself, how is what I just described different from how you'd been holding Regen Network before? What are some key considerations that are popping into your mind that you'd like to know more about? And maybe finally, just those two questions, and any other question that you're already holding. And just take a moment to reflect and kind of gather your thoughts. The thing that we're doing is building a big community around this, and hopefully aligning a lot of people around the world around the same set of questions. And I think that's, in general, I would just sort of conclude with the Regen token, the proof of stake token, basically represents the collective effort and value being dedicated by everyone who's using the system to regenerate ecosystem health and to make that regeneration measurable and the center of agreements between people. That's what it represents at the end of the day. And in order to represent that well, there's a little bit of complexity and flexibility that needs to be built into the system so that there's a good market mechanism there. But we've done our best to create at least the first version of that. So thanks for everybody being on the call, and please feel free to drop us questions or comments. As Will said, we're going to be publishing this, so if you have big sort of breaking concerns or needs, let us know sooner than later so that we can think about that before we put it up on the website and do some social media about it.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much for taking the time to take us through this. This is the clearest overview I've seen so far of this economics work. And it's really helpful to be able to share that and be able to just ask direct questions about it. It helps me to think about how I'm going to be designing stuff, right? So yeah, thanks very much.